dedicated our Saturday meeting to making presentations on little modules with bite-sized pieces of a business plan. So over the course of this coming year, we'll hit every major aspect of building a business plan. Last time we talked about how to describe your business. In this particular session, it is all geared towards how to describe your product. So I don't know if this is
good.
You good?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the intent is to give about a 10 or 20-minute presentation on the particular topic, and then open it up for discussion and what have you there, and go from there. So without further ado, again, so our step or our module or piece in the business plan that we need to talk about here is just describing the process or the product itself. And you could go through all the different elements of a business plan and say, this is important, this is important, this is important. But I would think that this is your heart and soul of your business plan. Because if you can't do this well, you probably need to stop right where you're at. So I just want to give you a little bit of helpful hints of things to think about when you're building that business plan in terms of describing your process or your product. So this is kind of the things I will hit. So pretty much here's a description of your product or service there. Some details about your product's life cycle. Speak a little bit about intellectual property, and then lastly R&D. So when you're speaking to actually describing your product here, these are some things to think about here. In terms of if you were sitting down with someone having coffee and you're trying to, or maybe it's a potential investor, and you're trying to describe your product, obviously you need that 30-minute or 30-second or 60-second elevator speech in terms of your product, but you need to sit there and speak to what are the specific benefits of your particular product. Why have it in the first place there? And you need to do it from the customer's perspective. So we got all these business students here. Probably one of the most prevailing things that you've learned, hopefully you've learned, is everything you do in business has to come from the customer's voice. So how does the customer describe that cup of coffee, or how does that customer describe that fingernail salon experience, or whatever the case may be, or maybe it's a clothing item, maybe it's a car, or whatever the case may be. But how would they describe it? Because it's very easy for us in the business venture to describe it, but we're speaking it from more of a sales side, more of a technical side, and we lose sight of what the customer wants. And that's why one of the reasons the very next module that we'll be speaking about is how do you describe your customer? How do you know your customer? But this is one of the things you have to learn how to do, is how to describe your product from a customer's perspective. And I've got a video I'm going to show you here in a little bit, and that'll hopefully give you a little better presentation. How's your product actually meet the consumer's needs? If it doesn't meet a need there, then why have it in the first place? Also, you need to, in that description, somehow compare or contrast your particular product or service to whoever your competitor is. And if you don't know how to do that, then you've also behind the power curve. Because if you don't know what your competitors are doing or what edge you have on it, you're setting yourself up for failure. It's kind of the roll of the dice kind of deal. And then lastly is speaking to at what stage of development is your product in. Because you may have a new and innovative product or service there, and you need to know where it is at in the life cycle. Which brings me to this here. So, some of you have seen the Shark Tank show, and many of the dialogues that the people that are coming there soliciting funds from the shark investors, the sharks are asking them, where are you at in your particular life cycle or your product there? Is there something new and innovative here? What have you? And for some of you, you may not even know or recognize what are the different stages in the particular product life cycle. And there's basically 4 of them there. So your introduction is something brand new and what have you, something that's growing, something that's in that mature stage, and then lastly something that's on the decline. And the examples I throw up here is something decline, VCRs, or the videotapes that go with them. Something that's probably more in the maturity stage is DVDs, and the growth stage is the Blu-ray discs and DVRs. And then, as of recently, here the 3D TVs. Those are all examples of it. But not only do you have to describe where you're at in that particular life cycle, you also have to speak to what are the factors out there that are influencing how fast you're going to migrate through those different stages. And these are the examples I throw out here of market size. market size could definitely impact how fast you move through a particular product cycle. If it's a very small one, it's probably going to go very fast. Where if it's large, nationwide or globally there, it's going to take you a long time to spread that product across that particular market. And anyways, there's a slower cycle. Cost is another good example. Technology, competition. If you're the only game or a person in the game there, you're probably going to have a larger or a longer life cycle. If you have competitors, they're going to move forward through it really quickly. If you don't, something to put in mind there is your drug manufacturers. A lot of cost and technology involved there, but there's also a lot of competition. And they move through the life cycle of a new pill or whatever the case may be is very quick. And the biggest challenge for them is to get that recovery of the research and development costs associated with it there. So speak to that. Intellectual property. One of the very first things that an investor will want to know is, especially if this is something new, is what's proprietary about it, and oh, by the way, do you own it? Do you have a controlling interest in it? What have you done to safeguard whatever that proprietary aspect is? And some of you may or may not know you can go out and get patents. More importantly, if a patent takes a long time to get, but you can also get a provisional patent. So you go out there and make the application, describe your technology or your situation here and apply for provisional patent. And all it does is protect your particular interest in this product or service or whatever it might be while it's going through the patenting process. And it's also very cheap. And many of your lawyers here in the local area can push you through that real quick. But they want to know, what steps have you taken to protect yourself to get the most out of this particular business thing. Along with that, again, it's always important. Again, we have to think about who are we describing this product or service to here. And in this case here, if we're talking to investors, they need to know that, hey, there's some aspects here that, the secret recipe is classified or it's confidential or whatever the case may be. They need to know that, hey, we're going to share some with you here, but not all. Along with that is the non-disclosure agreement. And a good example of where this is coming into play, you guys don't know it, our visitors, but we do the Lion's Den. What our Lion's Den is, so out of our visitors here, how many of you have seen the Shark Tank on TV? Yeah? Our Lion's Den is modeled after that. And what we do is we actually ask business folks to come in. We give them a questionnaire about where they're at with their business planning, and then they meet a panel. This panel is going to, I don't want to say drill them, but they're definitely going to assess where they're at in the business planning process. And at the end, instead of the panel investing in that particular person's business, what we're doing is saying, hey, out of all these things in the business planning, we see that these are your top 3 concerns or issues that you need immediate attention to. And oh, by the way, we have this list of mentors, members of our club or members of the local economy that are business experts in that particular thing. And so we may say, hey, you need, your next thing is financial planning. And so we might recommend to whoever that person that meets the Lion's Den is to mentor with this banker or this investor or whatever. And that particular mentor will donate, maybe 5 to 10 hours in a given month there to help that person address that particular need in the business planning thing here. But as part of that is we have non-disclosure agreements. So when someone comes to our panel, all of us sign those non-disclosure agreements. So you don't let the cat out of the bag and someone who's sitting in the room listening to this Lion's Den thing is going to go steal your idea. It's actually a legally binding non-disclosure agreement with all the people in there. So, but this is extremely important in that regard. All right. This is my soapbox here. It goes back to the customer, knowing what the customer wants. The investors, whoever they might be, need to know how are you researching and how are you developing your product and your service. So for my business students in the room there, you guys recognize this? No? Wow. Okay, you're going to see another slide on it here in a second, but it's called either Quality Function Design, so QFD, or House of Quality. This is a very good tool to actually gauge and measure the importance of what you're offering to what the customer wants. Along with that, it also shows a relationship between what you're trying to achieve in your processes and it also aligns and compares you to your competitors and translates it into no-kidding priorities as to how to address a particular customer's need. So this is a good way of capturing how you do your research and development. Because this is the kind of the, if you were looking at a house, this is the front of the house, and it kind of gives you an idea of what's inside the walls of the house. Anyways, so we'll speak to that. But I want to show you a video here in a second. See if I can get this here. Here, let's do it this way. Okay. So there's going to be a test after this video. Okay?
Engineering. I've done everything from assembling biological equipment in the dark wearing Mach 4 gear to the current project. We're about to do a rapid engine change on the Humvee.
Thank you.
My name is Stacy Robin. Prior to working with Pit Stop Engineering, I've never even changed a tire before. My regular job is teaching 2nd grade at Keith Elementary in Walled Lake, Michigan. This is Stacy. I'm a little busy right now. Can you call back in a minute? Okay, thanks.
So, why would that particular video be relevant to the military?
It's all about speed.
All about speed?
Ease.
One aspect. There, that is definitely a variable. Yes.
Anybody can do it. Doesn't have to have a particular knowledge.
That would be a selling point there. This is an
There's a
out.
plan behind it.
I'm sorry.
There's a plan behind it.
There's a plan behind it. It really comes down to their mission set. So this was a derivative of all of our things that we were doing in Iraq. So this is a little bit dated here. And one of the concerns is the Humvees are going out. It's a very austere environment as far as the desert and everything else, and the sand wears really hard on the engines and what have you. And so when a Humvee would, the engine would fail, literally it would take them a week to 2 weeks to remove the engine, replace it, and put it back on the street. And with doing that that took that whole Humvee out of operation, which is less capability, less mission capability for that particular unit. So this particular company, that's what they tried to do. It says, hey, we can generate a process that we can do an engine swap in less than 2 minutes. The question is how cost effective is it? I mean, have all the crane and whatever the case may be at each one of the locations where they're repairing Humvees and all that. But they were definitely in tune with their customers' needs and produced a product or service that satisfied it. That's the challenge. Can you imagine going to the Shark Tank or going to the Lion's Den, to localize it here, and opening up your presentation with that particular video? And then asking for people to invest in your company so you can make that more economical for whoever the customer might be. In this case, it was the military, but it could be here locally. I don't know who makes Humvees, or what was it, the H2 or whatever. Who is it? Maybe, you know.
I wouldn't say they're from military, I'd say it's a race car team.
Race car team, yeah, that may be the case there. But just a local dealership here and having to do an engine swap. I know they don't do it very often in the garages at, you know, Seekins or Jeans or whatever the case may be. But can you imagine how that particular technology could transfer to, again, the dealership, and then translate into dollars and cents for that particular dealership's service warehouse? So again, it's a case of how well do I know my customer, how well can I speak to their needs there, and then produce a product or service that is meaningful to all those customers' needs, and then capture it all in, you know, a short period of time. In this case here, truly research and development. If I was trying to describe, these are our research and development aspects of our particular product, and it was related to that particular engine swap thing here, I would use the video to do it. I mean, it's a perfect, granted it's more than 30 seconds, but it's a perfect 30-second elevator speech in our R&D, and it's very convincing as far as the effectiveness goes. So research and development is extremely important. I mentioned earlier this house of quality or quality functional design. At somewhere, you are going to have to define who your customer is and translate it to, okay, what do they need, and then how do we translate it to a product or service here. This is not intended to be a class on QFD or house of quality. You could spend a whole semester, students, on learning what QFD is. I mean, that's an entire profession all by itself, especially from a manufacturing standpoint here. But just to give you an idea, this example is about a rock climbing harness here. So over here on the left, it has customer requirements, and so you guys can read it. So these are some of the things that the customer wants to be. Hey, we want it easy to put on, comfortable when hanging, fits over different clothes, accessible gear loops. That all speaks to the usability. And then the performance. Doesn't restrict movements, lightweight, safe, and attractive. And from here, on the top here, it talks about actual performances or aspects of it here. So it meets the European standards, the harness weight, the webbing strength, the number of colors, the number of sizes, the padding thickness, the number of buckles, the number of gear loops, so on and so forth. And all it's doing is showing the relationship between here and here, as well as over here they speak to their competition and how well they do it. And so they translate this to this, and then lastly from this down here to the actual technical aspects where you get your metrics and what have you. And their legend here is the red circles are very strong relationships. So if I'm trying to design a process or a product there, I want to put my most money where those strong relationships are. And then where I have a very weak relationship, so here's some examples here, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time and energy in there. If it's going to be, there's going to be energy there, it's going to be a second or third or fourth order effect. There's just it just happens, but I'm not investing hard-earned capital in it. So I would encourage you, when you are trying to develop that product or service there, I don't care if it's selling coffee in one of these coffee shacks. You can spend a little bit of time and energy just sitting at the breakfast table and going through this here, and then bounce it off some of your friends or your business associates and gel this up to make it very meaningful. So apparently, across the street here, they've done that there because there's a coffee shack over here serving coffee in bikinis. Someone said that was important, and they're making a good business of it. So, but I would encourage you to do that. So I wanted to use this kind of as a closure of this part of your business plan as far as describing your process, your product or your service here. But you have to be very knowledgeable of why your product exists and what your investment is and how you differentiate your product or service from your competitor. Questions? So just to recap, again, good description of your product or service there, details about your product life cycle, the intellectual things as far as provisional patents, copyrights, patents themselves, non-disclosure agreements, what have you, and then lastly, good, strong R&D. Yes.
One comment on the intellectual property. So the rules have changed, the laws have changed so that it's the first one to Patent actually gets the patent, not necessarily the owner. So if you describe something to somebody, if you tell me what your idea is and I go off and patent it, I now own the patent. So for those of you at the university, go talk to Dan White and his team there, because you have resources that a lot of us in the public don't necessarily have. And it's important to get a good attorney and good advice when it comes to copyright and patent issues.
Yep, good. There was a question back here, so Kitty.
Which avenue would you take if you had a business that was mandated? Most of everything that happened in the business is mandated by government.
I'm trying to give me an example so I can take away something. I mean, you're in the assisted living business. The government prescribes specific standards, right?
Yes.
So is your question, how do you differentiate yourself based on how well you meet the standards?
Exactly.
It's a case of, so if I have a government standard, I'm just going to put it in my terms. Maybe you'll be able to appreciate this. That means I'm giving 3 stars. I'm the average. I mean, I meet the standard. But in your case, Sarah, you want a business that's 5-star. So you're going to differentiate yourself. Says, yes, not only do we meet the government standards here, we take it to the next level. It's a case of the Ritz-Carlton experience there versus the Motel 8 experience. Motel 8 meets the government standards. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to be in business, right? But you want to come across and say, hey, I'm giving you the Ritz-Carlton experience here, and I'm doing it on, Joe the plumber's budget line, right?
Yes.
So, champagne and a beer budget, right?
Always.
There you go. Good question. All right, other questions? Yeah.
If I can just add to what you just talked about the assisted living thing, the ADA has certain rules that just be the standards. We all know that some of the ADA rules are the standards below what they should be. So that would be the 5-star thing, is that you make reality happen instead of just the substandard.
Sir, the UAF folks, are you guys getting like extra credit for attending today?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, at least we found the motivation there. All right, cool. Other questions? Okay, so I appreciate you listening to my presentation here. So just for your timeline perspective there, so next month, right? Next month we have the Lions Den, right?
Yes.
So that's December 7th. And then I think it's January 4th is our next meeting after that. So, and I believe on that one, I'd have to look at my schedule, but I believe we're going to be talking about describing your customer. Will be our presentation. Is that right?
January 4th is crafting a marketing plan.
Oh, crafting the marketing plan? Okay.
On the back of the
I was just going
agenda.
off the cuff.